1 year of employment abroad. The one requirement that is different about a blanket for an L-1B, they have to be part of a profession. And like I said earlier, most of the time immigration views a professional level position as someone who holds a bachelor's or higher. So we'll often get that person's degree evaluated by a credential evaluator in the US to make sure it's equivalent. You can maybe in some cases, like with engineers, get away with someone who doesn't have a degree, but you're better off if you have a clean, situation, especially if they want to stay here long term.
And sort of like for those engineers without degrees, and just a quick one here, is that maybe a situation where some of these blueprints or apprenticeships that you mentioned earlier might be sort of that defining factor? Or would they be looking for something?
Yeah, it could be. And so, in some cases, certain posts around the world, they'll view it a little bit more flexibly than others. So it's not like, what you get in Brazil will be how it's treated at the US Embassy in London. So you really have to do your homework and know your post.
Thanks for that. And now, sort of looking ahead, what are the strategic considerations that employers should keep in mind when using the L-1 visa as part of their workforce planning in this rapidly evolving immigration landscape?
So one thing that happened during the first Trump administration was the creation of this Buy American, Hire American standard that we had to start using in immigration cases. I haven't heard of that coming back yet, but that's an argument that may be good to throw in there as things evolve. President Biden made it and the H-1B modernization rules, and hopefully, it sort of is still applied somewhat to Ls. Trump hasn't gotten rid of the H-1B modernization rules yet, but deference to previous petitions is supposed to still apply. We'll see if it is in Ls. So when you file an initial petition, that's where you really have to make your argument. And then, if you do an extension or renewal, it should be a little bit easier if the person's doing all the same things. But, we'll see. This administration may make it harder to do renewals as well. And then it's going back to the merits and making additional arguments like the Buy American, Hire American one that I mentioned. And then another strategic problem built in with the L-1B is that, like I said earlier, the foreign national is only given 5 years to be here. So if they want to stay here permanently, you may need as much of that 5 years as possible to do a green card. So, someone can easily, be in the green card process and max out their 5 years. And so planning has to be done around that as well.
Jackie, thank you so much for your perspective and insights here. I know that this has been an interesting session so far, and I hope that for everyone watching back at home, they feel the same. And for those of you joining live, these L-1 petitions require careful planning, strong documentation, and ongoing compliance. Staying informed about adjudication trends and expectations can make a meaningful difference in how these cases are reviewed. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. ImmigrationQuestion.com is a networking platform where users can ask immigration-related questions at no cost and engage directly with participating attorneys. We're also proud to share that ImmigrationQuestion.com is Better Business Bureau accredited and ISO certified, reflecting our commitment to transparency, accountability, community education, and security. Jackie, based on your experiences, how do platforms like ImmigrationQuestion.com help immigrants and immigration attorneys such as yourself?
Well, I mean, in this day and age, even just this past week, there's been so much immigration news. You really have to stay on top of what's coming at us. I mean, it can be overwhelmed. So understanding your news sources, going with the ones you trust, and, creating the hive mind to understand where things are headed is helpful.
Thanks for that. And now, before we get into our live Q&A, just one more question for you. Jackie, for these companies that already have L-1 employees in the US, what are some proactive steps that they should be taking to maintain compliance, reduce the risk of audits, RFEs, or any sort of future petition denials?
Right now, I would say the main thing is I want to know when people are traveling abroad, because there have been so many changes around that. We had an immigrant visa travel ban announced earlier this week for 75 countries. Immigration, another thing is immigration doesn't like it when they don't know where someone is working. So if an L just decides to move to another state, there's really no regulation that requires notice, but it may be a good idea to, in a petition, list all the places where the person will be working. I think those are my two biggest thoughts on that.
Well, definitely something to keep in mind. And if you've just joined us, we've been talking with attorney Jacqueline Lentini, Esquire, on intercompany transfers, compliance, RFEs, and global mobility solutions. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move into our live Q&A session. This is your opportunity to ask questions directly to a licensed immigration attorney. Drop your questions in the chat or just give us a call live at 516-703-3483, and we'll take as many of them as possible. All right, and our first question is from Bashiru, and they would like to know whether it's easier to get a L1A visa than an L1B.
I mean, it really depends on the actual facts of the case, but just in general, yes.
All right, so Bashiru, in general, it's going to be a yes, but again, it's going to depend on your particular circumstances, the company, everything really. And our next question is coming in from Aseta, and they'd like to know if their company can use an L1 visa if they're a startup and new in the US.
So the US company, there are special regulations for a new office. You'd want the business to be in business for a year before they can sponsor, and they have to have physical premises. And then a new office L would only allow for 1 year, because immigration, they're not sure it's going to work out. So they want to review it again at the 1 year mark to make sure it's a viable business. That's going to be an uphill battle.
And our next question from Mariana. She's already in America on another visa, and she'd like to know if she can change to the L1 visa without leaving the country.
That's a tough question, because remember, part of the requirement is that you've had 1 year out of the previous 3 in the company abroad. And so I don't know how long you've been here and what visa status you're on, if you would be able to qualify for the L. Normally someone, for instance, who is a student in the US on F1 status is not eligible for an L, because they don't have that 1 year employment abroad.
Well, Mariana, hopefully that helps. And our next question is from Janice, who would like to know which documents a company needs to prove that specialized knowledge for L1B visas.
So as I mentioned earlier, training certificates, but they have to be from the actual company, not like, Microsoft Word, training, Excel training. They have to be proprietary things about the business. We mentioned blueprints, if it's some kind of machinery, if it's IT related, showing coding, and you can redact as much as you need so you keep privacy of a customer. But yeah, it depends on the nature of the position in terms of what you'd want to include, but those 3 things there. And again, if someone has been employed abroad for 10 years in the employer entity abroad, that's easier to show specialized knowledge than if the person's, just barely meeting the 1 year requirement.
Thanks for that. Janice, make sure to look into what your company can give you there. And coming out from Yinka, who'd like to know if their L-1 petition gets an RFE, how long do they have to respond?
So that's really up to USCIS. The standard time frame is 90 days, but sometimes immigration will play hardball and only give you 30 days to respond. You just have to read the request for evidence. And there's no extensions, so that's a deadline. It's your deadline.
So Yinka, if you got one of those RFEs, make sure to just give that a read. And because we're running on time here, this is unfortunately going to be our last question from Khadijat, who says that their company did not submit enough evidence. Could a lawyer fix that denied L1 petition?
Possibly. If it's already been denied, it would mean a refile. So a refiling would mean, looking at the denial reasons and addressing them to make sure that it's an approvable petition the next time around.
All right, Khadijat, I hope that helped. And that's going to go ahead and wrap up our Q&A session. I do have one more question for you, Jackie. As you know, there's been growing discussion around proposed H-1B reforms in 2026, including a new weighted selection process. How might changes in the H-1B landscape affect employer reliance on the L-1 visa? And what should companies consider when balancing these two options as part of their global mobility planning?
So, based on the requirements for the L, not everyone is going to qualify for it. I would say the first visa that employers look to is the H-1B. So the cap season is now, and it's going to be much different this year. We don't have exactly everything that I think we need to know how the weighted cap selection will be. But so the government starts their fiscal year on October 1st. And so this is actually the fiscal year 2027 H-1B cap season. And you can file an H-1B up to 6 months prior, which gets us to April 1st. So since we've gone to an online registration system, USCIS will announce a 2-week period in March in which they will allow employers to register the foreign nationals that they want. And it's actually now a beneficiary-centric application registration. And so this time, instead of just submitting bare bones information about the foreign national and the business, we're going to have to do that weighted analysis up front. So in order to understand the wage situation with the weighted wage selection process, you need to understand that DOL has a wage library they use to decide what level of position should be at. So wages in New York City are going to be different than wages in Denver. And the wage library breaks it out into 4 different levels. Level 1 being entry level, with level 4 being completely independent. And the idea of the weighted cap selection is to incentivize employers to only apply for those and prioritize those foreign nationals who are making and commanding the highest salaries. And it's also to hopefully eliminate perceived abuse in the H-1B program. But it will be restricting a lot of those F1 international students who are here who hope to switch to H-1B status after they finish their schooling. Because when someone finishes their degree, they're normally not starting out at the highest wage level, level 4. They're usually starting out at a level 1. And the way the Federal Register, they have provided some information about this, and they expect that for a level 4 wage, someone whose name is thrown in the cap should have over a 61% chance of getting selected versus a level 1 wage of having just over 15% chance of selection. So this is going to be a very different cap season.
It certainly sounds like it. Well, thanks so much, Jackie, for sharing your time, insights, and experience today. Do Your perspective helps clarify a visa category that does play a critical role in multinational workforce planning. And for everyone watching, thank you for joining today's webinar. We hope this discussion helps you better understand L-1 compliance, RFEs, and how intercompany transfers fit into broader global mobility strategies. And a reminder to check that RFE to see how long you have to respond. You can always visit immigrationquestion.com to ask immigration-related questions and stay informed about upcoming discussions. If you want to revisit today's session or share it with others, the full replay will be available on Spotify soon. Just search up the Borderless Talk by immigrationquestion.com. Join us again next week for another live conversation covering key immigration updates and practical guidance. And until next time, stay informed and stay connected.
Thank you, Nicola.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today, Jackie. I really appreciate having you on.